The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thohungva. Good news for many Native families with the announcement of the expanded child tax credit. 15 million households will now receive the full credit. According to the Center on Poverty and Social Policy at Columbia University, the enhanced tax credit would reduce poverty by nearly 62% for Native American children. The monthly payments will be $300 for each child who is 5 years old and younger. Children between 5 and 17 will receive $250. The payments are set to lapse after a year, but President Joe Biden is pushing to extend them through at least 2025. A citizen of the Osage Nation is taking command of the United States Naval Test Pilot School. A ceremonial flight for Commander Jeremy DeBonds took place over Maryland's Naval Air Station yesterday. It literally involved DeBonds flying in an airplane and taking the lead from the former commanding officer who flew in a helicopter. The Osage citizen is the school's first commanding officer who did not graduate from the program. The commander has been serving as the school's executive officer for the last 18 months. His maternal grandfather, George Morrell, was a World War II veteran and served in the U.S. Army. California Assemblymember James Ramos is working with tribal leaders to pass a bill replacing the sculpture of Unipero Serra. Serra was the founder of the California mission system that resulted in the decimation of indigenous populations in the region. The statue was removed from the grounds of the state capitol after being toppled in July of last year. Ramos, who is Serrano and Cahuilla, would like to put up a monument honoring Sacramento area tribes. Wilton Rancheria Chairman Jesus Tarango says the statue represents a double injury. His tribe is among those supporting the bill. The state Senate will vote on the bill after the legislative recess. The Muskogee Nation will host its first in-person event in 2 years this weekend. The tribe is located in Oklahoma, and the event will be held in Texas. Its Dallas Muskogee organization will host the gathering. They are helping people apply or renew citizenship cards and registering to vote. They will also be teaching Muskogee genealogy and the traditional language. One of the co-directors of the organization says having an event like this helps him feel connected to his tribe.
So for me, what it's going to bring is not only a sense of connection to things that people have been missing, their cultural heritage and things like that. It also gives you a chance to not only just see it, but be a part of it, which is why we want to have this meeting. The gatherings of other people that you get to see that are a part of your nation.
More than 2,000 of the tribe's 80,000 citizens live in Dallas. Indigenous people across North America are working to change the way we use, understand, and create maps of outdoor spaces. The effort is part of a growing national conversation about colonialism and the land back movement. OutdoorOnline.com reports activists are turning to Indigenous-led mapping projects. One of these projects is Native Land Digital. This interactive online map shows Indigenous land by nation or community rather than by state and country borders. The Indigenous advocacy organization Rising Hearts is encouraging people to use the map to engage with Native communities. And the organization is doing more than adapting standard maps. They're also focused on reclaiming Indigenous map drawing traditions that are based in storytelling and community. And if you would like to learn how to contribute to the map, you can visit their website at native-lands.com. A new study suggests satellite data is helping Indigenous Peruvians save the rainforest. The study appears in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. 1/3 of the Amazon rainforest falls within more than 3,300 formally recognized indigenous territories. The trial looked at the impact of reducing deforestation by indigenous forest community monitoring patrols. It found a 52% drop in deforestation in 2018 and a 21% reduction in 2019. The reduction in forest loss were especially concentrated in communities facing immediate threats from illegal gold mining and logging. During the 2-year study, indigenous communities prevented the destruction of an estimated 1,100 acres and avoided the release of more than 234,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. As Native people, we know that our culture is ever evolving, but we remain rooted in the legacy of our ancestors.
Today, we look at transitions. Retiring Morongo chairman reflects on 18 years of leadership, and an Ojibwe woman finds healing through basket making.
This is Indian Country Today.
Robert Martin was elected chairman of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in 1983. He served 18 years as chairman and another 11 years on the council. Over the last 4 decades, Robert Martin helped lift Morongo from generations of crushing poverty into the economic and cultural powerhouse that it is today.
You know, I really think the most important is probably the gaming. I think back to the early mid 80s. I was testifying before Congress about the tribe, and lack of jobs, unemployment was on the reservation was nearing 90%. Unwed mothers, the percentage was close to that. Yeah, there just was not anywhere you could get a job. Of course, like many reservations, on the reservation, our members had to travel off to work, and we saw this opportunity at the time. The tribe did for gaming, and we opened a let's say modest game, high stakes bingo, and it did very well, and provided those jobs that we were looking for. A lot of our members have worked their way through management and have done very well. Matter of fact, one of our members is the assistant manager, and she's been there many years, and I think she's looking at retirement here fairly soon. But you know what gaming really brought us, maybe more on the social level as well as the economics. Our kids, what I've seen, it's not a situation where they're, I don't want to say ashamed, but maybe reticent to say they're Indian. And I think that's across the country, or it has been across the country. It wasn't popular, especially when I was growing up, to be an Indian from the res. People always had things to say about that. But today, our kids are proud of it, and their living conditions are much better. Our roads are not dirt roads anymore. We paved them all. We have health insurance, life insurance, and jobs if they are able and want to work. And that's for all of our members, descendants, Indians in the area that may or may not be from Morongo. That's one of the things I feel real strongly about. And it's affected tribes across the country. I don't know if we all thought that in the 80s, like 83, 82, 83, how the effect that we would have. But us, along with the Cabazon Band, whom we were enjoined in 1987 to go to the Supreme Court, it was life-changing for a lot of Indian people across the country.
The Cabazon case went to the Supreme Court in 1987. It ruled that states could not regulate tribal gaming.
It strengthened tribe sovereignty. I can tell you a little short story. Back in those days when we were, I used to go back to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of the Indian Health Service here at Morongo. We have a consortium of tribes that belong to our local clinic. And gaming, I'd be back there on gaming as well. And I was on an elevator, and one of the tribal chairmen from another fairly large reservation was he and his entourage, because there was about 5 or 6 of them, were all on the elevator, and I could feel this guy staring at me. And so I looked at him, and he recognized me. I didn't recognize him. And he said, "Are you back here on gaming?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, we have a bingo. He said, "We're watching that case very closely. If it goes bad for you all, it goes bad for the Indian country." And he was just cautioning me. He felt that we had too much to lose if we lost. And he was probably right.
Chairman Martin, when you look back, what are you most proud of?
I think the ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare. We can talk about economics and how well the tribe has done there, but socially, as you all know, I'm sure, back before the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed, children on reservations were taken away and either to boarding schools or foster homes, or were adopted out for a variety of reasons. But they were taking them away from the Indian families. And I saw that personally. I supported ICWA from the very beginning. And I'm really proud of that. We've joined with 3 to 4 other tribes. Right now, this case is moving forward. Those that are attacking Indian child welfare, it looks like this case will be going to the Supreme Court on this. And it's not about the children anymore. It's about the tribe's sovereign rights and what it means to be a tribe today. That's what's being attacked.
Robert Martin, retiring chairman of the Morongo tribe in California. When we come back, healing through nature and tradition. ICT national correspondent Marinette Pember sometimes finds unexpected stories along the trail. Stories that emerge in these situations take on lives of their own and are far richer and more interesting than anything they could have expected. This is one of those times. She reports on a nuanced, emotional story about how traditional Native crafts and lifeways can enrich and offer healing to those who do this work.
I recently traveled to the Bad River Ojibwe Reservation in Wisconsin to explore the art of ash basket making. April Stone of the Bad River tribe demonstrated the labor-intensive process of pounding strips of bark from an ash log and weaving the strips into baskets. What began as a simple how-to story about the history and craft of basket making, however, grew into a much broader narrative about how traditional lifeways can guide and heal our lives.
So I made the first basket, and then I spent that year then from the spring of 1999 to the summer of 2000 doing nothing but weaving baskets.
Now you also made a casket.
I did, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
There was this one grant that I had written through the Minnesota Historical Society. So I was denied that first year that I wrote the grant, but I tried again. And so when I wrote the grant the second time, I incorporated a community aspect to it, where I would be doing this work in public in downtown Ashland. And for 30 days, I'd open up my studio for the community to come in and work on the casket with me. So if they ever needed to take a break, they could go into the sitting space and relax and just be contemplative, just whatever they needed to do. Some people came in and they talked about death. They talked about when they made a coffin for so-and-so and that person died. they remembered when they buried so and so. Some people brought in beadwork and just did their own work next to me doing my work. Some people would not come in the door at all. They just stood at the door and looked at me like I was crazy. Like I wasn't just operating on like regular hours. It was when my door was open and the lights were on, come inside. And I had this sign that was made for the sidewalk, and it said, "Be into game, come in."
Do you intend to be buried in that casket?
No.
No.
And I was able to make this basket, which was actually an artist statement based on my relationship with how much I love working with ash and the emerald ash borer that's coming through, the invasive bug that's killing millions upon millions of ash trees across the United States. And so that burial basket project was actually representative of the death of black ash and what that means to me. It was death. And so many uncertainties about being able to work with black ash in the future, because this is like my passion. This is where I do all of my work. This is like where I've spent the last 20 some years gaining experience, traveling, doing research, just trying to really understand black ash and its history here around the Great Lakes, in particular northern Wisconsin, affiliated with my tribe. And I'm just trying to figure out that story. And my studio, my rental was up at the end of July. And this was back in 2016. And it also happened to be the day that my husband was getting married to his new wife. And they were just getting married like a mile and a half down the road. And I was sitting in this space and I was just crying because this thing that I was making took on an energy, like a presence, and it was very feminine. And it was me. And I was grieving the loss of my husband, you know. And I had to take that coffin out of there, and I need to put this away. And I put it away for a year, and I didn't touch it. Because what started out as an artistic expression turned into a healing for myself. So it was death. It was the artistic death, but it was also the real death. But from that, then a year later came rebirth when I took it out and I put it in the lake and I submerged it and I took it all apart and I rewove it. And what took all that time to work on took only 45 minutes to undo. And then I drove it down to the Minnesota Historical Society, and it's now in their history center on display.
On the Bad River Reservation in Wisconsin, Marionette Pember, Indian Country Today.
Generations of Native American children were removed from their homes during the Indian boarding school era. There was a break in culture and identity. Today, survivors and their descendants are still healing from this traumatic period in history. The National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition was formed to address this historical trauma. Christine McCleve is the Chief Executive Officer.
The mission at the Boarding School Healing Coalition is to lead in the pursuit of understanding and addressing the ongoing trauma that was a result of the U.S. Indian boarding school policy. And what that really means is that, understanding and addressing begins with this country confronting this part of its history. And so looking for federal acknowledgement and truth-telling and healing that can come about from this. As a national organization, we cannot be culturally relevant for all the tribal nations across Indian country, across Turtle Island. And so we rely on our tribal partners, our community partners, but really, it depends on the individual and where they're at. Obviously, seeking out counseling from, professional services, but also seeking out your community leaders, your spiritual leaders and traditional healers, relying on family and friends. We actually have a trauma resources document on our website, boardingschoolhealing.org, which covers some different things that you can do to care for yourself in a holistic way, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Across the world, many countries have acknowledged similar trauma and offered apology or reconciliation. The Interior Department announced a federal Indian boarding school initiative.
Prior to the announcement from the Secretary of the Interior that they were going to launch an internal investigation, the United States had never acknowledged its Indian boarding school policy or its impacts. let alone, agree to investigate or look into those policies, experiences, and impacts. So we are still behind other countries, but we have started on that path. And we believe that there will be a long journey ahead of us with a lot of truth telling, not only when the Department of the Interior looks into locating the records from these boarding schools, but also once we hopefully get a truth commission where we can actually collect testimony from boarding school survivors and descendants. This initiative by the Department of the Interior is a wonderful first step on the path to truth and healing, but there is still a long way to go, and we still need a federal truth commission. The records do show a lot of these church institutions, these church schools were receiving federal dollars. And in terms of the Department of the Interior's investigation, the Secretary's press release said that they would be looking into the federal records as well as working with non-governmental organizations, and that would be the churches. And so hopefully those churches will voluntarily share their records. If not, then the federal government will need to use legal means to get access to those records. What we focus on at the Boarding School Healing Coalition is what we call the historical assimilative model of Indian boarding schools. And that is, directly under that policy to assimilate and quote unquote civilize Indian children. And so in the 1970s, a lot of the self-determination legislation that came forward actually reversed that policy. So the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, the Indian Education Act, Language Revitalization Act, Indian Child Welfare Act, all of these things reversed that original policy and protected our language and culture and the right to keep our children and not have them taken from us. And so the schools that are still open today, and there are 73 Indian boarding schools that are still open today. Actually, only 15 of them are still boarding. The others are now day schools, but they all come from that legacy of the historical assimilative model. We believe that that legacy should be acknowledged and discussed and preserved and talked about in order for healing to take place. And we recognize that the schools that are still open today are very different. Some of them are run by the Bureau of Indian Education in partnership with tribal communities. Some of them are actually run by the tribes. Some are still being run by religious institutions. And, hopefully all of these schools are doing right by our children. We know that now language is promoted and culture is promoted rather than prohibited. And so, we think they are doing a better job. That is, a large question. That's not the mission of our organization. We're focused on the historical model.
The Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania was one of the earliest boarding schools, and now some remains of children are being returned to tribes.
As a national organization, we're here to support tribal communities and tribal nations. A lot of what we do is focused on research and education and advocacy. And so in terms of what's going on at Carlisle, it's a unique situation because it's still an Army barracks. And so this cemetery is, on federal land. And so the Army has, after many requests, agreed to repatriate these children. Now, we've had requests and questions about cemeteries at other locations and other boarding schools, but each will have to be a case-by-case situation depending on who owns the land, if it's privately held or federal land. But in Carlisle, we know that tribal nations and relatives of these children can go through an affidavit process and request that their children's remains be returned home. And so we basically just take a support role and are here to advocate for the rights of those relatives and for those children to be returned home. And we've gone to Carlisle in a few instances to support emotionally and spiritually, and we just continue to pray for those children and those relatives that they find the peace that they are seeking.
Thank you, Christine McLeave, CEO of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. Shirley Sneevy took a road trip to the Black Hills last weekend to see friends and family and take in some art. She has this report from Native Pop.
Held in downtown Rapid City, South Dakota, Native Pop, or People of the Plains, is a gathering of arts and culture. It provides economic development for more than 100 Native American families in the area. MC Bryant Highhorse said this year's theme was to honor survival after the pandemic.
That the people will live well. It takes all of us to bring healing to this world, to the cultures.
The festival featured entertainment, including musicians and a fashion show. Angela Babby, an Oglala Lakota artist who lives in Billings, Montana, took Best of Show.
I've won Best of Show twice now, which is such an honor. And just the encouragement and meeting collectors and the artists, the fellow artists are so inspiring to me. But yeah, this is the best art show. It really is. beats Santa Fe all to heck.
LaFawn Janice is the event's executive director.
I love working with people and I love creating opportunity for people. And POP fits right along in with all of that because, just seeing people thrive is what fills my heart.
In Rapid City, South Dakota, Shirley Snavy, Indian Country Today.
For more news and updates, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe and have a great weekend. I'm Mark Trahan.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.